He heard the hiss before he saw her. Emerald eyes in the dark, promising either his extinction or his evolution. The prophecies said, if the beast ever found the Serpent Queen, the bloodlines would burn. He stepped closer anyway. One word from her lips could end 30 million years of war. If she kissed him first. If love could end a 30-million-year war. Would you risk the world for one kiss? Tell me in the comments and subscribe before the prophecy repeats itself. The rain came sideways off the cliffs, needling the last standing pines and driving their scent into the gorge. Lorcan Hale didn't flinch. He stood at the mouth of the obsidian cave with his palms open to the storm, letting it numb the ache that had been gnawing for months. The old scars across his knuckles itched the way they always did before a trial. The elders called it the call of the first fire, the way the beast remembered war. He called it insomnia he couldn't beat, not even with whiskey and midnight runs. Below him, the river churned like a throat clearing to speak a terrible truth. The Hale crest, wolf's head, crescent fang, flashed muted silver on the ring he wore, heir to a house that had carried a legend for 30 million years. Our blood is the gate, our beast the key. His father used to say it with reverence. These days, the words sat in Lorcan's gut like stones. He'd buried his father 6 months ago and inherited the crown of the things that couldn't be explained. Patrols on moonless nights, treaties with the families who still howled when the fog came down. A vault of bones that whispered when he slept. Don't go in alone, his sister Bryn had said, grabbing his forearm that morning. The Watchers say movement, a slim shape, not ours. Lorcan had promised he'd take a guard. Then he had sent the guard to the lower ridge and come himself. He needed the quiet, needed the kind of silence where secrets were allowed to breathe. He touched the cave's edge. The rock was cold as a verdict. Somewhere inside something breathed. He took 3 steps forward. The storm softened behind him to a damp hush. Wet stone. Old air. A flicker of phosphorescent moss mapped the way inwards, like constellations scattered underfoot. His heart kept its steady drum, trained, contained, until the smell changed. Not damp, not rot, exotic, warm. A trace of crushed basil and ozone. The kind of scent you only knew if you'd spent your life nose to the ground. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His ancestors had taught him when to keep language leashed. The beast in him stretched, uncoiling with a sore pleasure along his spine. Mine, it whispered, without asking what it was. Find. Thousands of miles away, the woman who used to be called Nixara stood barefoot in a hardwood studio, hung with mirrors that had seen far too many lives. The mirrors did not lie, and yet tonight they failed to tell a complete truth. She watched her reflection with a scholar's skepticism. Olive skin pale from too many winter months. Black hair braided tight against a neck that remembered crowns. Green eyes that belonged to a lineage extinct on paper and eternal everywhere else. In this life, she signed emails as Nia Ceres, PhD. The kids at her university called her Dr. Ceres, or when they thought she was out of earshot, the Serpent Queen. The nickname should have stung. It soothed. The body remembers what the mind denies. She taught evolutionary myths and the anthropology of monsters to students who posted her quotes in their stories and argued in the comments as if they could outlogic a hummingbird. She smiled at their certainty. at the way they trusted written history more than the ache in their chests. Her own chest ached often these days. She woke to the phantom weight of scales along her spine, to dreams of a coastline that no current map could draw, to a voice at the edge of the surf saying, "Enough, love. Lay down your war." On the bar, she traced a slow port de bras the way her first mother had taught her. It was not ballet, it was remembering. Her elbows folded like wings, her wrists rippled. Even here, in a borrowed dance, she coiled. She didn't choose the word serpent, the world did, 1,000 times across 1,000 tongues. Sometimes it was a slur for chaos, sometimes it meant wisdom. To Nixara it was a mirror. To Nia it was a study guide. Once she had led armies with a gaze that turned predators soft. Now she led seminars with a voice that made the most jaded sophomore look up from a cracked screen. Her phone buzzed on the windowsill. A message from her research partner, Ash. Got something. Hale County. Obsidian cave with fossilized vertebrae. Massive. Spiral pattern in the sediment. Sending coordinates. Her breath clipped. Spiral. Hale. The words lit up in her like flares in fog. She knew the name from footnotes and funeral songs, from bone memory and an old promise. Hale is the fang. We are the quill. When the star wound opens, meet where glass eats the sea. She pinched the bridge of her nose until the room steadied. It's a coincidence, she told the empty studio and the 5 previous versions of herself who were listening anyway. The window bled rain. Far below, sirens sighed and were gone. The city didn't care what slept under its bridges or what throbbed beneath its museums. It treated history like a dress-up trunk. Nia loved it anyway. She loved the coffee carts and the old woman who swept her stoop at dawn as if the east wind paid rent. She loved the bitter neon joy of a place that had the audacity to survive. And still, the coordinates on her phone tugged the edge of her mind like a child insisting, "Home is this way, please listen." She swallowed. "Just data," she murmured. But her hands were already pulling her raincoat from the hook. In the cave, Lorcan knelt by a pool black as absence and dipped his hand. The surface was satin cold. Ripples, stitched light into a trellis of silver. He closed his eyes and listened. He didn't hear words. Those were the tools of people pretending to be tamer than they were. He heard a rhythm, an old call and response. Beast, coil, beast, coil. He curled his fingers. The ring on his knuckle pulsed once, a pulse that might have been pressure or memory. The rock behind him whispered, barely sound. A suggestion of movement, like silk drawing across stone. He went still from the inside out and let his breath go shallow. The voice that came was low, more shape than sound. Turn slowly. The accent had edges, ancient vowels riding a modern mouth. He turned. A woman stood 10 paces away, hood pushed back, rain darkening the shoulders of a graphite coat. The cave's thin light found her eyes and ignited something that should not exist. Pupils narrowed to slits, then widened, then settled into the green of deep water just before a storm breaks. She didn't look afraid. She looked tired of pretending to be anything but what she was. "You shouldn't be here," Lorcan said, and winced at how it sounded. A warning learned by the admonition of a man who has been told his whole life that strangers bring endings. She stepped closer. "Neither should you," she said softly, and the syllables curled like smoke. "But here we are." His gaze flicked to her hands, unarmed. To her stance, balanced, coiled without menace. To the way her throat moved when she swallowed, careful, as if taming a tide. "Name," he said. It came out more growl than question. "Nia," she said. And then, like a door unbolting, "Nixara." The beast lifted its head in him, as if a long winter had finally ended. His father's voice roared in the back of his skull. "If you ever meet her eyes, son, you run." Another voice, older than fathers, older than houses with names, older than the word run itself, said, "Kneel." He did neither. He took another step toward her until the scent of crushed basil was threaded with rain and electricity. "You know what this place is," he said, not a question. Her gaze flicked to the pool at his feet. "I know what it opens," she answered, "and what it closes." Their words slowed, as if they were walking across black ice. Beneath them, a million seasons of war and truce and exile shifted like plates grinding under an ocean. He wanted to say, "My father died before he could tell me why the beast wakes when the wind hits this cave." He wanted to say, "I haven't slept in weeks, and when I do, I dream of a coil made of light around my throat, and it doesn't choke me, it saves me." He said none of it. He watched her jaw set in the quiet way brave people prepare for being misunderstood. "What do you want here?" he asked. Her smile was small and devastating. "An ending," she said, "or the beginning after one." They stood within arm's reach now. Two magnetic fields, testing the rules of matter. The pool made a sound like a sigh. The storm beyond the cave decided to pause, as if eavesdropping. Nia raised her hand. He didn't flinch. She lightly touched the hail ring. A graze, no more. The metal flashed with a patient, old light that seemed almost relieved. "Your line," she whispered, "has carried the lock for too long." "And yours has carried the key," he said, shocking himself with the certainty of it. "Once," she corrected, the word breaking. Those eyes flickered again. The slits were a confession and a crown. "I kept the key in my throat. I loved what it opened. I hated what it unleashed." "The war," he said. The word tasted like smoke. "The vow," she said. The word tasted like rain. They exhaled, two old storms softening, and for the first time since he'd stepped into the cave, Lorcan felt the beast not as a weapon welded to his bones, but as a guardian at a door he had the right to close. He looked at her hand still near his, at the faint tremor that betrayed the poise. "You're shaking," he murmured. "I'm remembering," she replied. A drop of water fell from the ceiling, struck the pool and made a ring that widened and widened until it kissed both their boots. A simple touch of physics, and yet both of them suffered the illusion that the ring marked a boundary crossed. He could feel the moment narrowing, a throat of time they were about to pass through that would change whether the bloodlines continued to draw breath as enemies or learned the strange art of becoming kin. Somewhere in the dark behind them, a pebble skittered. The cave answered with a hollow warning echo, others perhaps on their way. The world would not allow these two to speak like this for long. Nia's voice softened. If we do not choose together, she said, others will choose for us. Lorcan breathed in the basal electric air and nodded. Then we choose here. Her mouth trembled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We don't even know each other's favorite coffee yet. Mine's too strong, he said, surprising them both. Mine's sweet, she admitted. Fitting, he murmured. And the beast inside him, stubborn, scarred, did the strangest thing it had ever done. It leaned at its heavy head against his ribs and went quiet. He held her gaze. I'm Lorcan. Nixara, she said again, and then, with the life she wore like a coat, Nia. The storm found its anger again, slamming the mouth of the cave with the water and wind. Behind the sound, the world rearranged itself. If your family's oldest story demanded you meet your greatest enemy alone in the dark, and saw a different truth in their eyes, would you trust what you'd been told, or what your body knew? Tell me in the comments. Which one would you choose? And why? The storm did not end. It folded inward, funneling its fury into the cave until thunder sounded like a heartbeat under their feet. Lorcan and Nia stood a breath apart, light flickering over wet stone and memory. Your people hunted mine, she said. My people were told yours cursed the moon, he replied. And you believed them? I believed what kept us alive. She tilted her head. Then perhaps you were never alive to begin with. The words landed like a strike. Sharp, true, undeserved, and yet precisely what he needed to hear. Lightning flared outside. For an instant, the cave was pure white bone. In that split the heartbeat, Lorcan saw not a scholar but the echo of a queen, scales ghosting across her skin, a crown of living serpents coiling and settling like hair caught in wind. Then the flash was gone. Rain replaced the vision, but his pulse refused to slow. You saw it, she said quietly. I saw something. You saw truth fighting through history. He took a step back, instincts warring. The beast growled beneath his ribs, protective, yearning, confused. Truth doesn't mean peace, he said. It never does. It means seeing what peace costs. Her hand drifted to the obsidian wall. 30 million years, she whispered, tracing faint spirals etched in the rock. This is where the bloodline began. Beast and serpent swearing never to merge again. Lorcan's throat tightened. The lines she touched glowed faintly, answering her skin. Then why are we here? He asked. Because we are the last who remember both sides, she said, and the war remembers us. From the pool rose a low vibration, a hum that wasn't sound but sensation. It throbbed through stone, spine, memory. Lorcan staggered. Nia's pupils thinned again to emerald needles. The seal, she gasped. You've triggered it. What did I... Your blood recognizes mine. She looked at his hand, cut by stone, drops sliding into the pool. You woke the old pact. The pool brightened from black to liquid mirror, showing a battlefield neither had lived, but both somehow recalled, or is turned to ash. Winged beasts and coiling serpents tangled in skyfire, a woman of scales cradling a dying wolf in her arms. Nia flinched. That was me. Lorcan's breath caught. And that, he pointed at the wolf, was him, my first ancestor. The day the vow was forged, she whispered. I vowed to guard the key by destroying every heir who sought me. And he vowed to find you until peace was made, Lorcan said softly. 30 million years, and neither of us kept our word. They stared at each other across the trembling light. Then the vision faded, leaving only the sound of their breathing and the storm outside that suddenly felt small. You should leave, she said, voice brittle. Once awakened, the seal calls its witnesses. The Watchers will come. He almost laughed. The Watchers already hate me for seeking truth instead of tradition. Let them come. I mean it, Hale. So do I, Ceres. Her gaze sharpened. You call me by a mortal name as if it can protect you. Maybe it can protect us. That stopped her. For the first time, fear, not anger, flickered in her eyes. You think there's an us? I don't know what else to call two people sharing the same nightmares. She looked away. The air crackled, ozone and inevitability. You don't understand what it means when a Hale touches a Serpent Queen. It binds fate. It invites history to feed. Then let it eat, he said, stepping closer. Maybe it's time someone digested the past. She tried not to smile, but failed. A single corner of her mouth lifting despite herself. You talk like a fool. Maybe, he said, but you didn't step back. He reached toward the carvings she'd traced. The symbols glowed brighter, wrapping their shadows in amber light. 1,000 whispers rose. Voices of beasts and queens, promises, spoken in languages older than sound. The air thickened, heavy with ancestral grief. Nia pressed her palm to her chest. It's happening again. What is? The fusion, the moment before creation and ruin become the same breath. She swayed. Lorcan caught her, instinct more than decision. Her body was fever hot, energy coiling under her skin like living fire. The contact seared through his veins, pain and recognition fused. For a heartbeat, he saw her true form, serpents made of light rippling down her spine, eyes molten gold. She gripped his collar. Let go or you'll burn. Maybe I need to. The cave shook. Their combined pulse cracked the pool's surface. Steam hissed upward in a halo. Every nerve in his body screamed not from agony, but awakening. The beast within roaring not to fight, but to kneel. And then the energy broke. The light collapsed back into silence, leaving them both gasping. Nia stumbled away, trembling. You shouldn't have done that. You fell, he said, voice raw. I fell because your ancestors stole balance from mine. Every touch reopens it. He frowned. You're talking in riddles. Because truth in full would shatter your mind. Try me. Her laugh was cracked porcelain. You wouldn't survive knowing that the beast and the serpent were lovers before they were enemies. The statement detonated between them. Lovers? Yes, she said, eyes glistening. Until pride taught them war was easier than forgiveness. They built nations from vengeance. And we carry their punishment, he murmured. No, she said. We carry their unfinished love. Silence wrapped them. The storm quieted as if listening for an answer neither dared to speak. Lorcan reached for the ring again. If this cave remembers their vow, maybe it can hear ours. Nia's voice shook. Be careful what you offer. I'm not offering, yet I'm asking. He stepped into the faint glow until it painted his scar. What happens if we end it here? No war, no hunt, just stop. The bloodlines vanish, she said. The power that guards the gates dissolves. Every creature born of our myth becomes mortal. Then maybe the world deserves mortality. And what about us? She asked. He hesitated. I don't know. She closed her eyes. That's the tragedy. We never did. The hum returned, louder, distant, multiplied. Shadows moved beyond the cave mouth. Tall, pale figures with mirrored masks, their movements serpentine, inhumanly graceful. The Watchers, Naya whispered. Ancient enforcers of the vow. Lorcan's beast surged up, ready to fight. Then we finish what they started. No. She grabbed his arm. They feed on conflict. Violence restores the seal. Then what do we do? Will we show them something they can't consume? He looked at her, understanding dawning too late. What are you? She pressed her forehead to his. Trust me. Her lips brushed his. Lightning and sorrow combined. The cave flared in golden fire, the Watchers freezing at the threshold. Their mirrored faces reflected two beings locked in a kiss that was neither desire nor defiance, but reconciliation itself. The fire seared through every old oath carved in stone. The Watchers hissed, dissolving into smoke. The cave's ceiling rained dust like snow. When the light dimmed, Nia fell against him, limp. Lorcan caught her, lowering her to the ground. Hey, stay with me. Her breath was shallow but steady. It's working. The vow weakens. You burned yourself out. Energy seeks balance, she murmured. One must give so the other can live. No, he said fiercely. We both live. He pressed his hand to her chest, feeling the flicker of her heart. The beast inside him whispered old words in a forgotten tongue. He repeated them, not knowing their meaning. His ring glowed, sharing the pulse between them. Slowly, color returned to her lips. Her eyes opened, softer now. You shouldn't have done that. He smiled faintly. You keep saying that. Because you keep doing it. The storm broke outside, finally releasing its burden. Sunlight threaded through the fissures above, striking the pool. The water cleared, revealing a new carving at its base. Two intertwined forms, wolf and serpent, spiraling into infinity. Nia traced it with trembling fingers. It's rewriting history. Then maybe history needed an editor, Lorcan said. She laughed weakly, the sound half sob. Do you realize what we've done? Ended the war? No, she said, eyes bright. We've started evolution. Their gazes locked, equal parts awe and terror. Beneath them, the cave settled like a creature exhaling after centuries of holding its breath. Lorcan offered his hand. Come with me. Where? Wherever peace needs to begin. She looked at his palm, calloused yet open, and after a long moment placed hers in it. The air around them hummed again, not warning, but blessing. As they walked toward the light, the beast within him and the serpent within her moved in tandem for the first time in memory. Outside, the storm cleared to a double rainbow arching over the valley. The hail crest on his ring shimmered, the wolf's head now encircled by a serpent biting its own tail. a sign of wholeness restored. He turned to her. What now? We live, she said simply, and learn what that means when war no longer defines us. He nodded. Then let's start by finding coffee strong enough to handle the end of history. She laughed again, pure this time. Make it sweet. He squeezed her hand. Fitting. If reconciliation cost you everything your ancestors built, but finally gave you peace, would you take it? Comment below. Would you risk your legacy for love? The next morning dawned too quietly. The air above Hale Valley hung heavy, as though the clouds themselves were eavesdropping. Lorcan Hale had not slept. The beast inside him paced like a caged tide, uncertain what to do without an enemy. Naya lay beneath the canopy of his mountain lodge, eyes closed, but not resting either. When the first beam of sunlight hit her skin, scales shimmered faintly, remnants of power the human body was never meant to hold. She covered her arm before he noticed, or so she thought. I saw, he said softly from the doorway. She opened her eyes. Then you know it's fading. The war may be over, but I am vanishing with it. He crossed the room in 3 strides. No one vanishes on my watch. Your watch? Her voice cracked into a laugh. You think this is a fairy tale where the hero keeps what he saves? You broke an oath older than your son. You don't even know what it will take to keep breathing now. He knelt beside her cot. Then teach me before you disappear. She turned her head away, jaw tight. Teaching you would mean binding you again to what we ended. I won't condemn another generation. Lorcan stood, the movement too sharp. So what? Walk out of the ashes and pretend none of it mattered? You kissed me to stop a war, and now you want me to believe it was strategy? Her silence said yes and no. Outside, the lodge creaked as wind pressed against it, impatient with human frailty. Bryn Hale arrived before noon, boots muddy, eyes bright with fear and anger. You did it, she said, half accusation, half awe. The elders woke screaming. The caves below the estate cracked. The bloodstone seals dissolved. What did you unleash, Law? Lorcan poured her a glass of water because whiskey would ignite the argument faster. Balance, he said. Balance? Bryn slammed the cup down. Half the pack can't shift. The old marks are gone. They're human, Lorcan, do you hear me? Human. What did you give away? He didn't answer. The truth would sound like madness. I touched a Serpent Queen, and we taught the world to stop choosing sides. Nia appeared behind him, thin blanket wrapped like armor. He gave back what was stolen, she said. Power was never meant to be hoarded in blood. Now it belongs to choice. Bryn turned, eyes widening. You're her. I'm what remains of her, Naya corrected. Bryn looked from one to the other, disbelief curdling to dread. Do you even realize what the clans will do when they find out you're together? Lorcan exhaled through his nose. They can't fight ghosts. They don't need ghosts, Bryn snapped. They need a scapegoat. By nightfall, smoke rose from the lower valley. Signal fires. The packs were summoning council. Naya watched from the balcony, her pulse faintly luminescent under skin. They're afraid, she said. Fear invents gods and monsters. I used to feed that fear. It made rulership easy. And now? Now I understand its cowardice wearing ceremony. He leaned on the rail beside her. Then let them come. We'll speak truth. You still think truth persuades anyone? I think silence never does. A long pause. The kind that only exists between people who know each other too well after too short a time. I should go, she said. You walk out of this valley. They'll brand you the cause of every lost power and dying legend. Then let them. Legends are cages. He turned her toward him, fingers on her shoulders. You talk like someone who wants to die. She smiled without humor. I've already died, many times. It's living that terrifies me. 3 days later, the council convened in the old amphitheater carved from mountain bone. The air smelled of wet moss and distrust. Lorcan stood at the center, Nia beside him. Around them, wolves in human form filled the stone benches, silver eyes flashing under the torches. Elder Rowan rose, beard streaked with frost. You broke the covenant, Hale. The beast's oath kept this valley alive. Without it, our children are ordinary. Alive and ordinary is better than powerful and cursed, Lorcan said. Murmurs rippled. Rowan's gaze slid to Nia. And you, the serpent who devoured kings. Do you come to finish us? Nia's voice was steady. I come to forgive you for believing I was your enemy. The amphitheater fell silent. Forgiveness was not the language they spoke. Rowan sneered. Forgiveness will not feed the magic that guards us from the abyss. Perhaps the abyss was never outside you, she said. The old man's hand twitched toward his blade. Enough riddles. We will decide your fate by dawn. As they were escorted to the holding quarters below the hall, Lorcan whispered, You knew this would happen. Yes, she murmured. Resistance is the last reflex of fear. The cell was barely a room, iron bars on one side, dripping rock on the other. Lorcan paced, Nia sat cross-legged, humming something low and ancient. What is that? He asked. A lullaby from before time. It keeps the serpents in my blood calm. He crouched beside her. And what keeps the beast in mine calm? Me. She said simply. He almost smiled. Then don't stop. But she did stop, and when she looked up, tears shimmered unshed. Lorcan, if they demand my life to restore balance, let them have it. He froze. Don't you dare. This body is temporary. The peace will last if the story ends cleanly. No, he said. Peace bought with your death is still war by another name. She reached out, fingertips brushing his jaw. You make everything sound noble. Maybe that's why the universe keeps testing you. And maybe it's tired of seeing me fail the same test. Midnight. Chains clinked somewhere beyond the corridor. A whisper slithered through Lorcan's mind. Smooth, familiar, in his father's voice. Free her. Spill the elders' blood. Take back what they stole. He gritted his teeth. Not you again. You think peace means surrender. It means extinction. Without the bond, you are nothing. He pressed his palms to his temples. The beast was trying to reassert control, feeding on his fear of loss. Nia opened her eyes. They're talking to you, aren't they? He nodded. Then listen closely, she said. Every ancestor who ever roared did so because they couldn't cry. Crying is how you silence them. He almost laughed at the absurdity. But when the next whisper came, kill to protect her, he clenched his jaw, breathed, and let tears come. The sound that left him wasn't a growl call, but a broken sob that echoed through stone. The whispers stopped. The beast lay quiet. Dawn approached with thunder again. No storm this time, only the marching of boots. Bryn appeared outside the cell, keys in hand. "Quick!" she hissed. "They voted. Rowan wants blood. I can't let them do this." Lorcan caught her wrist. "If we run, they'll hunt us. If you stay, they'll burn her." Nia rose. "Let them. Running only delays the story." Bryn unlocked the gate anyway. "Then let's delay it somewhere safer." They fled through the tunnels beneath the amphitheater, emerging into a forest smeared with dawnlight. Mist wrapped the trees like half-formed ghosts. "North Ridge," Bryn said. "Old watchtower. No one goes there anymore." Lorcan carried Naya when she stumbled. Her skin was cooler now, scales almost gone. "You're fading faster," he whispered. "The world doesn't need a queen of serpents when it finally remembers mercy," she murmured. "But maybe it needs a teacher." "Then teach me how to keep you here." She smiled weakly. "Love me in the daylight. That's all any myth ever wanted." By noon, the Watcher's remnants and the council guards surrounded the tower. Rowan's voice boomed through a horn. "Return the serpent and we'll spare the Hale line." Lorcan stepped onto the balcony. "You don't decide mercy anymore." A crossbow bolt hissed past his shoulder. He didn't flinch. Behind him, Nia limped forward. "Let me speak." He hesitated, then nodded. She leaned on the railing, voice calm, amplified by power she no longer fully possessed. "You fear losing your beasts and your fangs. But what if those were the things keeping you from becoming more? You mistake savagery for strength. True strength is knowing when to end the hunt." Lightning forked across the clear sky. A final warning from whatever gods still listened. Rowan drew his sword. "Enough sermons!" He signaled the archers. Before they released, Lorcan roared. A sound neither beast nor man, but something reborn. The air trembled. Arrows turned to dust mid-flight. Rowan staggered back, eyes wide. "What are you?" "Free," Lorcan said. When the soldiers fled, the valley itself seemed to sigh. Yet inside, both of them shook. Nia slumped against the wall. "You unleashed power without rage. That's new." He sank beside her, adrenaline fading to exhaustion. "I thought ending the war would end conflicts inside me. It didn't." "It won't," she said. "Peace isn't an end. It's maintenance. Every heartbeat, a choice." He touched her hand. "Then we choose again." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Until choice becomes nature." Hours later, the sun spilled molten gold over the valley. The fires in the distance went out one by one. Bryn approached quietly, carrying bread and coffee. "You two really think they'll forgive?" she asked. "No, Lorcan said, "but maybe they'll forget how to hate." Nia sipped the coffee, sweet, exactly how she liked it. "Forgetfulness is the seed of peace." Bryn eyed her brother. "You staying here?" "For now," he said. "Until the valley learns to sleep without nightmares." Nia smiled faintly. "And until I learn to live without scales." She held out her hand to the morning light. The shimmer was almost gone, but in its place glowed something subtler. A warmth, steady as breath. Lorcan took her fingers, threading them through his. "The beast still whispers," he admitted. "Let it," she said. "Just remind it we're building something worth protecting." If peace stripped you of the power that once defined you, would you cling to what you were or trust who you could become? Tell me in the comments, which is harder, ending a war or learning to live after it? By the time the valley exhaled, the old watchtower had settled into a rhythm. Drip from the cracked cistern, hiss of wind around broken stone, 4 heartbeats trying to learn a new song. Lorcan mapped the room without looking. 2 cots, a long table scarred with knife marks, a hearth that had not seen honest fire in a decade because a Hale guard had once died there, and the elders had declared it unlucky. He struck a flame anyway. Bad omens were just stories waiting for better endings. Nia watched him from the doorway, blanket pulled tight. The rising heat flushed her cheeks. A thin shimmer moved beneath her skin like a fading aurora. Bryn leaned against the window slit, scanning the tree line. "Signal fires are out, but I don't trust that quiet." A small cough from the stairwell. A face appeared. Sharp nose, ink-smudged fingers, eyes that had memorized too many footnotes and not enough stars. "If we're doing introductions," the newcomer said, "I am the one who texted the cave coordinates. And yes, before you accuse me, I absolutely followed you." Nia's grip loosened. "Ash!" "You turned your phone off," they said, wounded and practical at once, which, for the record, is rude when you've possibly awakened a multi-epoch curse and I'm your emergency contact. Bryn raised an eyebrow. "You bring snacks?" Ash produced a satchel, like a magician, and unloaded bread, dried figs, cheese, a thermos, and what could only be described as weaponized coffee. "I come prepared." They looked between Nia and Lorcan. "So, end of an age?" "More like end of an argument that forgot what it was about," Nia said. Ash's gaze flicked to the Lorcan's ring, then to Nia's pulse. Their face softened. "You're flickering. Fading," Nia corrected gently. Ash set down the thermos with too much care. "Then we need rules. If we're stuck here, you're dark." Bryn echoed. Ash nodded toward the tower's inner wall. "I saw it on the way up. Thin spiral etched in the stone, pulsing with..." They hesitated, searching for a word. "With agreement." This place was designed as a stabilizer. If a Hale and a Serpent entered together after a vow shift, they had to remain within the ring for 3 days. Break the circle early, and the energy rebounded. War would relight like dry tinder. Bryn muttered something that would have made their grandmother throw a shoe. "So we can't leave." "We shouldn't," Ash said. 72 hours. Force proximity. Think of it as cosmic quarantine. Lorcan almost smiled. "Perfect." "I always dreamed the universe would force me to sit still." Nia's laugh caught in her throat. Half bright, half broken. 3 days is a long time to keep choosing the same truth. "Then we choose it every hour," he said. The first hour was logistics. Bryn checked the perimeter. Ash unpacked research notes with the zeal of a person who believed paper could fend off fate. Lorcan dragged the table to the center of the spiral, etched faintly into the floor. its lines throbbing a heartbeat slower than his own. Nia knelt and pressed her palm to the stone. "How does it feel?" Lorcan asked. "Like a lullaby sung through a door," she murmured. "Comforting and infuriating." Infuriating? Because it means the old ones planned for us. They didn't trust us to plan for ourselves. He watched her profile in the firelight, regal and tired and unbearably human. The urge to touch her forearm, to say "I'm here" in a language older than words, etched through him. He didn't move. Forced proximity made every gesture a confession. Ash spread a map of the valley. Topography, old clan lines, migration routes, places marked with tiny serpent sigils that only Nia would know. "We need a working theory," they said briskly. "What happens after the 72 hours? Do your powers vanish, fuse, normalize?" "Normalize," Nia said. "If we hold, the seal rewrites reality slowly. It resists new sentences. Like language, like habit." Bryn smirked. "The Valley's terrible at new sentences. The Valley learned them once," Lorcan said. "When my people stopped being wolves all the time and learned to go to market." "Your people still howl at farmers' markets," Bryn noted. "Small steps," he said. Nia squinted at the map. "The amphitheater's here, the cave's here, the spiral vein." She tapped the watchtower. "Runs through us." Ash chewed their pen. "So this tower is a node, a place where stories not." "Exactly." Nia's gaze softened on Ash. "I'm glad you came." Ash's lips twitched. "Someone has to keep you from monologuing." Bryn poured coffee into tin cups like blessings. "What about the council? They'll regroup." "They'll try," Lorcan said, "but the old enforcement teams dissolved with the vow." "They don't need enforcers," Bryn said. "They need fear. And fear is a renewable resource." Silence occupied the room, companionable and tense. The fire popped, the spiral thrummed. 4 people occupied a circle drawn by extinct gods. At dusk, rain returned, the softer kind that doesn't threaten, only insists. Lorcan and Nia ended up on the stairs where the stone was warm and the view generous. Trees lifting their faces to drink, mist ribboning the gullies, a hawk gripping the lightning-bent pine like an emblem. They sat close enough that their shoulders could have touched if either of them stopped arguing with gravity. "Tell me something true," Nia said suddenly. He glanced over. "Now?" "Before the night invents lies to fill our mouths." "Okay." He inhaled the damp air. "I thought I'd end the war and feel triumphant. I feel bereaved. Like I buried a weapon I hated and missed the weight of it." Her lips softened around a sadness he recognized. "I know. I keep reaching for scales that aren't there, doll. I keep trying to coil when I should just exhale." "Do you regret it?" he asked. She took too long to answer, which was an answer. "No," she said. "I regret needing it for so long." He let that sit. "My turn? Tell me something true." She watched the hawk launch and dissolve into low cloud. "I have loved before," she said quietly. "All of them were versions of the same mistake. Men who wanted my power, or wanted to save me from it. None of them wanted me when I was ordinary." He stared at her hands. They were capable of crown and cradle with equal ease. "Ordinary looks good on you," he said. "Does it?" she asked. The question wasn't coy. It trembled with a kind of terror that made him want to kneel again. Not out of worship, but solidarity. He shifted half an inch closer. Yes. There was a sound from below, muffled voices, then Bryn's laughter cutting clean as a bell. The moment held and did not break, an egg cupped in two careful palms. Tell me another truth, she whispered. He swallowed. I'm terrified of being enough. Enough for what? For you. For peace. For the valley. Without magic in our bones to make obedience easy. He shook his head. I can fight monsters. I don't know how to win elections, negotiate irrigation, repair a road. She leaned in until her shoulder brushed his, light as the first raindrop. We will learn. He closed his eyes. Learn. A word both comforting and humiliating. He exhaled and let the shame go with it. They didn't kiss. Forced proximity has its own gravity, but it also builds tides. Tonight, the tide moved out, leaving wet sand and footprints dried by the hearth. Night was a busy animal. The tower collected small sounds. Bryn's steady breathing, Ash turning pages, the rain chewing moss. Nia murmuring in a language as old as salt. Lorcan's heartbeat recalibrating itself to a rhythm that wasn't the call to hunt. Around midnight, Nia woke with a gasp, fingers digging into the blanket. The world tilted, heat boiling under her skin, cold clawing her spine. The spiral on the floor brightened in a slow pulse, answering her body with what felt like an echo. Lorcan was there before she called, palm on her back, heat meeting heat. Hey, stay with me. She shook her head, teeth chattering, balances shifting. It wants us closer. Us? She breathed. Me. He slid onto the cot, sitting behind her, back to the wall, drawing her gently against his chest like he would hold a wounded soldier. The contact steadied the pulse of light on the floor. Her muscles unclenched. Better, he murmured. It feels like someone else is breathing for me, she said. Borrow it, he said softly. We have plenty. Her head fell back against his shoulder. This proximity is not an accident. No, he said, but it doesn't get to decide what it means. They breathed together. The spiral dimmed. Across the room, Ash closed their notebook, eyes shining. You two rewire metaphors in your sleep. Bryn threw a blanket over them both without comment and returned to her post. The storm moved off like a tired king relinquishing a throne. Morning arrived with birds too cheerful for the mood. Steam curled from tin cups. Nia's skin was cooler. Lorcan's eyes looked less haunted. Ash had drawn 5 diagrams explaining nothing and everything. Bryn returned from a perimeter check and tossed a small pouch on the table. Found this tied to the hawthorn by the stairs, Gay. Messenger must have left it before dawn. Lorcan unknotted the cord. A flat stone slid into his palm, carved with a crescent fang crossed by a serpent, the ancient neutral mark. On the back, 4 words burned in old script. Parley of ashes, dusk. Nia touched the stone with a fingertip. It's genuine. Bryn snorted. Or a trap. Both can be true, Nia said. Ash frowned. Parley of ashes. Wasn't that the ritual used when neither side could fight, but both refused to yield? Lorcan nodded. Held in the amphitheatre. Witnessed by anyone brave enough to watch. Bryn crossed her arms. You step into that pit, and they'll eat you alive with questions you cannot answer. We can answer one, Lorcan said. We ended the vow. And when they ask for payment? Bryn pressed. Nia's eyes found his. We already paid. Not to them, Bryn said. They'll want restitution, land, titles, blood. Then we offer something they didn't know to want, Ash said suddenly. Infrastructure, council. A seat at the table for those who lost power overnight. A promise of shared protection, not magical, but literal. Food stores, patrols, medicine. Replace what the vow gave with what community can. Bryn blinked. You trying to be our prime minister, scholar? Ash shrugged. I've read worse constitutions carved on turtle shells. Lorcan smiled despite himself. We can't leave the spiral until dusk. Good, Nia said. Then we prepare together. Forced proximity became strategy. The day unrolled like cloth across a wounded table. They argued policy and phrasing. They practiced the first 3 sentences until the 4th sentence knew how to stand upright. Bryn role-played Rowan, vicious and persuasive. Nia matched him with calm that tasted like rain. Lorcan translated rage into resolve. At noon, Bryn disappeared and returned with a basket of apples and a small strange gift, a ribbon of woven grass. From a child at the edge of the wood, she said awkwardly. Said her grandmother dreamed of a serpent and a wolf sleeping beside a river, and woke without pain for the first time in years. She set the ribbon on the table. She told me to tell you. Thank you. Nia held the ribbon as if it were made of light. The shimmer under her skin flickered and steadied. Sometimes the story fixes what medicine cannot. And sometimes medicine fixes what stories cannot, Ash said gently, and slid a small brown bottle toward her. Electrolytes. Your body still has, needs. She smiled and drank. In the late afternoon, they rehearsed again. Lorcan spoke the sentence that had been hardest to say. I do not want your submission. I want your partnership. He practiced until the want became invitation instead of demand. As dusk unspooled, the spiral on the floor softened like a hummingbird settling. The tower felt less like a cell and more like a ring, a promise. Bryn strapped 2 knives to her boots. I'll scout ahead and take the high seats. If Rowan lifts a blade... Throw your shoe first, Lorcan said. She smirked. Family tradition? Ash collected the notes, then left them on the table. Paper won't convince them. People will. I'll stand in the crowd and start the clapping if needed. Nia touched Ash's forearm. Stay where your courage doesn't make you a martyr. Ash swallowed. No promises. When they were alone, Nia adjusted the collar of Lorcan's simple linen shirt. An intimate, domestic motion that surprised them both with its tenderness. You still smell like Storm, she said. And you still smell like Betel and ozone. Fitting, she said. And the smile reached her eyes this time. He took her hand, turning the woven grass ribbon around her wrist like a gentle cuff. For luck, he said, though he didn't believe in it. Not really. He believed in effort multiplied by grace. She lifted his ring to her lips. A kiss not of possession, but acknowledgement, for memory. The spiral pulsed once under their feet. The 72 hours were not over, but the circle recognized the difference between leaving and arriving. They stepped across its edge together. The tower did not protest. Outside, the valley waited, the amphitheater carved like a listening ear into the mountain. torches rising one by one, faces tilting toward the thing they feared and secretly wanted. Halfway down the path, Nia took his arm. One more truth before we're performance. He slowed. Okay. I want to live, she said, not as a queen or a myth, with you. Apples and bread and stupid fights about paint colors and whether basil belongs on everything. His throat tightened. It does. Wrong, she said solemnly, and he laughed. And the laugh tasted like an answer he could bury into an arena where questions had sharper teeth than wolves. They reached the amphitheater rim. The crowd parted as if pushed by a tide. Rowan stood at the center, sword sheathed, face carved by a night without sleep. Beside him, 3 elders and, unexpected, a thin woman with a child's ribbon in her hair. The parley of ashes begins, Rowan called. Speak! Lorcan stepped forward. We came to end the hunt. Nia's voice followed, steady as a blessing, and to begin the work. Their hands found each other's like habit, new and inevitable. The crowd inhaled. The old story braced to resist and then, perhaps, relent. The amphitheater's stones kept the afternoon's heat, the way an old heart keeps old arguments, stubbornly below the surface. Torches smouldered along the rim. Faces gathered like weather, hard to predict and quick to turn. Lorcan's fingers laced with Nia's under a calm that was trained, not natural. Bryn took a high seat with a clear view of Rowan's hand and every archer's line of sight. Ash blended into the first tier, notebook shut for once, eyes sharp. Rowan lifted a palm, the crowd stilled. Parley of ashes, he called, binds all throats to truth. Speak, and the stone will accept or reject it. Nia's fingers tightened in Lorcan's. Old ceiling, she murmured. It listens for intention. We have only that, Lorca said, and consequences. He stepped forward first, because someone had to. Words carried better when they belonged to the person the crowd already blamed. We ended the vow, he said, voice steady. We did it in the obsidian cave with blood and choice. We didn't do it to shame our dead. We did it because we got tired of being their wars. He gestured to the benches. You want answers, we'll give you truth. But truth has context. Listen with the part of you that knows how to change its mind. Rowan's mouth thinned. Speak, then. Nia moved to the circle etched at the center. The old sigil burned faint and new. Wolf and serpent spiraled toward each other, not away. She knelt and laid her palm on the mark. The amphitheater sighed, a low collective intake, as the stone brightened under her hand like an ember deciding to be flame. I am Nia Ceres, she said, and then let the mortal name fall like a coat. I am Nyxara, I remember. The light climbed her wrist, tracing blue veins with gold. Her pupils narrowed to slits, then widened, then settled into green starbursts. When she spoke again, the words carried salt and wind and a wound older than language. Before your grandmother's grandmothers had names, she said, there were coastlines you no longer remember, and forests too tall to fit into your songs. In those days, the world made guardians because it was learning fear. The star warned in the north, cracked open once each epoch, and let through things made of appetite. The guardians were born to teach appetite to kneel. A ripple moved through the crowd, curiosity fending off derision. We were too, Nyxara said softly. A beast, forged from fang and loyalty. and a serpent, forged from coil and memory. The beast guarded the gates with tooth and howl. I guarded with a knowing, how to bind a storm, how to outwait a hunger, how to forgive without forgetting. Her gaze found Lorcan without effort. We were partners before we were legends, lovers before enemies, Rowan muttered. But the stones accepted her words. The light did not flicker. Then came the year the star wound ruptured early, she continued. The sky bled fire. The ground split like a jaw. We fought, together at first. A thin smile, grief's twin. He was beautiful. He held the line for 3 days and 3 nights without rest. And on the 4th, he asked me to end it in a way the world couldn't undo. Lorcan's chest felt suddenly too small. He knew this part in his bones without having ever heard it. He asked you to bind him. Her voice did not break. It did not need to. We believed, wrongly, that if the beast's power were woven into a bloodline, fissured and diluted by family and memory, the star wound could be starved. I wrapped him in words and scaled light. He lay down in the coil and became many. Your line, Lorcan, your crest, your oath, our blood the gate, our beast the key. Her gaze swept the benches. We called it mercy. It was also pride. Rowan took a step forward, eyes sharp as flint. And the serpents? I took the key into my throat. Nyxara's fingers hovered at the hollow at the base of her neck, as if a phantom weight still rested there. To ensure the beast could not be unbound, I swallowed the last word needed to break the lock. Power chose a body and called it a queen. I told myself I would be a librarian of endings. Then the world mistook me for a tyrant, and I obliged. She looked down, long lashes shadowing the confession. We began with love. We continued with control. The stone did not reject her. Some in the crowd shifted uncomfortably, the way people do when a story refuses to keep its villains pure. What broke? Asked a voice near the front. Thin woman, ribbon in her hair, the one Bryn had noticed earlier. She spoke like someone more accustomed to speaking to gardens than crowds, and the crowd listened anyway. Memory, Nyxara said, gradually. The beast's line forgot why it howled. The serpent's line forgot why it watched. Rule became ritual. Ritual became rumor. Rumor learned how to eat. She glanced at the elders. We passed our work to descendants who did not consent to inherit it. That is not guardianship. That is theft. Rowan's jaw jumped. A theft you fixed by tearing the spine from a people. Lorcan stepped in, heat under his ribs, but Nia's glance steadied him. No, she said. We returned spines to people who had traded them for fangs. A murmur like wind through dry leaves. Agreement and resentment tangled. Ash's voice cut cleanly from the tear. What about the Watchers? They asked. Every epoch has enforcers. Who created these? Nia's gaze cooled. We did. When trust failed, we built a police. They were scribes at first, witnesses, recorders, the ones who etched vows, so memories would not lie. Then they learned how to love their pens more than their pages. They turned witness into weapon. She looked gently at Ash. You carry their blood, scholar. Ash's face did not flinch, but something in their posture softened, as if a long-held suspicion had found its name. I guessed. Rowan seized the opening, So we are to believe that a queen who devoured kings made a police she couldn't control. Naya met his scorn with something that made a few in the benches sit straighter. If you have never built a thing that later taught you to fear it, you've never built anything worth the trouble. The stone approved. Rowan's lips thinned further. Why now? Asked the woman with the ribbon. If this was always a knot, why is today the day you pulled? Because grief finally outlived pride, Nia said simply. Because a son buried a father who had been the war more than he had been a man. Because I woke choosing death as a shortcut to absolution and found a man who would rather live awkwardly than die beautifully. Heads turned toward Lorcan. He swallowed. He'd planned something eloquent. What came out was plain as bread. I got tired of teaching boys that fury was a heritage. Bryn exhaled hard, the sound almost a laugh, almost a sob. Rowan's gaze was iron. And the cost, Hale? Magic is gone from half our houses. Children woke human who slept more. Do you call that mercy? If power was the only thing keeping us alive, we were already dead, Lorcan said. Strength will need a new definition. I'll help build it. You'll reign over it, Rowan snapped. Lorcan shook his head. No, I'll serve it. If the valley wants me at the table, I sit. If it wants me to carry water, I carry. Duh. That disarmed more than any sword could have. Service is an unfashionable word until the roof leaks. A younger man stood, broad-shouldered, eyes still wolf-bright despite what the morning had taken from him. If we believe you, he said haltingly, what keeps the star wound from opening now that your leash is cut? The same thing that always did when our oaths were honest, Nia said. Community. Bands of hands linked across thresholds. Watch, warn, care, rebuild. We summon bond the storms. You can build roofs. We hunted nightmares. You can teach children, mend trails, keep fires banked. The wound opens. People hold. Rowan scoffed, homespun wisdom to replace sanctified strength. And yet, the ribboned woman murmured, my knees don't burn today. She touched the grass ribbon at her hair. Last night I dreamed of a serpent and a wolf sleeping by the river. I woke without pain. She stood, wavering but clear. If that's homespun, it will do. Something shifted then, small, like a pebble choosing a different route down a slope. Others rose with minor testimonies. A midwife whose hands steadied during a breach. A farmer whose field had flooded every spring now drinking rain as if it had been thirsty and not punished. A child who had stopped sleepwalking into the cold. Not magic. Ordinary mercies amplified by a valley exhaling. Rowan lifted his sword slowly, point down. He did not draw it. The gesture was less threat than posture. Words and dreams, he said, but I watched 2 houses burn when we were still children. Words did not stop that fire. No, Lorcan said, but people did. My mother dug with her hands. Your father threw buckets. The watch was late. The vow was irrelevant. The elder's eyes flashed with the surprise of an old memory allowed back into the room. A horn sounded from the ridge. Long, low. Bryn stiffened. Ash went to the edge and peered down the switchback. Visitors, they called. Not ours. Figures approached. Not the pallid mirrored watchers, but something rarer, the coast keepers. A handful of sea-ward clans who had long ago left the mountains to stand where land met the wound. They wore coats slicked with salt and carried staffs carved with tides. At Thea's dying head walked a woman with hair like wet rope and the calm of a cliff. "We heard the vow snapped," she said, no ceremony wasted. "We came to see if the line still holds." Nia inclined her head. "Welcome, Edatide." Rowan bristled. "This is a mountain council." "The wound isn't a mountain," Edda said mildly. She stepped into the circle next to Nia and knelt, placing her palm beside the serpent wolf sigil. The stone brightened. It liked her. "We were there when the first pair knotted their oaths. We left when their descendants started loving their oaths more than the Chodhost." Her eyes found Lorcan. "Boy, do your shoulders know they're holding history or only your grief?" He swallowed. "Both." "Good. Truth wears better that way." She glanced at Nia. "Queen without crown?" "Just Nixara," Nia said. Edda's mouth quirked. "Just is a dangerous adverb, but we can start there." She rose and addressed the crowd. "The wound is grumbling, not opening, not yet. You want proof this new peace guards you? Give me 3 nights and your best listeners. We'll go to the river mouth and do what we used to before we forgot how. Pay attention. If the tide stands calm, you'll know you're held. If it recoils, you'll know where to shore the bank." Rowan stared. "You presume to teach us guardianship?" "I presume to remember with you," Edda said, "because remembering alone breaks people the way oaths do." The stone liked that too. It hummed. Nixara exhaled, and in that breath, Lorcan heard weary gratitude, the relief of a burden finally becoming a conversation. "Rowan," Lorcan said quietly, "you can call for my exile, or you can ask me to help roof your people's lives." The elder looked older than he had that morning. He looked like a man who had carried a lit coal for so long he'd forgotten how to open his fist. Slowly, he sheathed his sword fully. "Stories are stubborn," he said. "They don't surrender. They rust. I will not call for your exile, Hale. Not tonight. But I will call for terms." "Name them," Lorcan said. "First," Rowan said, "guard the weak before you guard your pride. Second, swear that if the wound opens and your new wisdom fails, you will not scapegoat those who stayed fearful. Third, share what you learn before you profit by it." Lorcan nodded. "Done." Rowan's gaze cut to Naya. "And you, Serpent? If this valley tolerates your living, what will you do with it?" People leaned forward. The air had the crisp taste of a moment that would be repeated to grandchildren with increasing embellishment. Nia looked up at the half-moon rising, thin, honest. "I will teach," she said, "not myth as headline, but myth as muscle. I'll teach how to coil, not to strike, but to hold and release tension so the body forgets how to harm itself. I'll teach bureaucrats how to breathe before they decree." A ghost of mischief crossed her mouth. "I will plant basil that doesn't take over every bed." Lorcan huffed a laugh. Relief loosened his shoulders. "And when people hate you anyway?" Rowan asked, as if to test if she had learned humility. "Then I will keep showing up," she said. "Because love—" She glanced at Lorcan and did not apologize for what the word made in the air. "It's not an argument. It is a practice." The stone warmed so brightly under her palm that a few hissed at the heat. It did not burn. It blessed. Silence fell. A different kind now. the kind that follows a storm and decides not to rebuild the same fence. Edda Tide knocked her staff thrice on the earth. Good. Now eat. Nothing wise was ever decided hungry. Laughter, uneven, real, spilled like water breaking a dam. Someone produced bread. Someone else, stew. Children edged down the steps to stare at Nia's not quite human eyes and Lorcan's not quite vanished scars. Bryn sent a runner to the watchtower for the apples. Ash took the center aisle and found Edda within 3 breaths, already sketching river maps on the back of a council proclamation. Lorcan and Nia moved to the amphitheater's lip where evening unrolled a lilac scarf over the valley. He turned his ring, the crest winked. Wolf circled by serpent, the circle whole. You told them, he'd said softly, about us. I told them about love, she said. Us is a verse inside that song. He watched torches bloom across terraces, as if the mountain was studding itself with stars. There's more, isn't there? He murmured. More backstory. There always is, she said. Smile, taste and fond. But the next chapter we write beats the last chapter we survived. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. Their fingers learned a new grammar. From the high seats, a woman began a song that had once marched armies and now soothed children. It named the beast not as a predator, but as a guardian, the serpent not as a deceiver, but as a rememberer. It did not pretend the past was gentle. It promised the future could be. On the 3rd verse, Rowan did something no one had seen him do in public in 3 decades. He sang. Edda Tide leaned against her staff, listening the way cliffs listen, without impatience, without fear. Ash pressed a page into Nia's free palm. For the archive, they said. First addendum to the old oath. We vow to be corrigible. Nia laughed softly. A good word. The best, Ash said, humbling. Bryn slid in on Lorcan's other side, bumping his shoulder with hers. You did all right, big brother, she murmured. We did all right, he corrected. Fine, she said, and tried for a smirk, but failed, tears glinting instead. We did. Nia squeezed his hand. The shimmer under her skin was faint now, but there, like the cooling of a forge. Not gone, transformed. Tomorrow? He asked. River, she said. Tides. Listening. Infrastructure meetings with too much coffee and not enough patience. Basil in only half the beds, he said solemnly. Quarter, she negotiated. He pretended outrage. Tyranny. Practice, she corrected. They stood while the song finished, and the amphitheater did the slow work of turning strangers into neighbors. When night finally found them, it did so not as an enemy, but as a blanket. Above the ridge, the star wound's direction, impossible to see to the human eye, throbbed almost imperceptibly less. Edda Tide felt it and did not smile yet. She did mark it on the map inside her pulse. The old story had not died. It had added a chapter in a new tense. The evening after the parley, the valley wore the color of forgiveness. Soft lilac fading into old gold. The amphitheater had emptied to embers and murmurs. Edda Tide and Ash spread tide charts on a bench, arguing amiably about what counted as listening. Bryn drilled 3 young scouts on signal calls that involved more whistling than dignity. And Lorcan and Nia slipped away toward the river, as if the path had been cleared for them by the day's decisions. They didn't speak at first. The hush between them wasn't awkward. It was reverent, like a sanctuary after the last hymn. Crickets stitched the margins of the path. A heron clacked once in tall reeds, then went still. When they reached the bend where the river widened to mirror the sky, Lorcan spread his cloak on a smooth slab of stone warmed by the day. He sat and waited, not for permission exactly, but for alignment. Nia untied the grass ribbon at her wrist and wound it between her fingers, smiling in that private way that happens when the body remembers safety before the mind does. "You're getting good at the waiting," she said, settling beside him. "I'm getting good at not hunting what I love," he answered, then winced, half at the truth and half at how naked it sounded in the dusk. Her head tilted. "That is an old skill trying on a new purpose. It fits you." He exhaled and watched the breath dissolve. Downstream, children's laughter leaked from the terraces as families carried stew and bread back into doorways that felt less haunted tonight. He noticed how shoulders in the distance were lower than usual, how voices rose without scanning the tree line. He noticed, too, that noticing this made his lungs feel larger. "Tell me you're ordinary," Nia said softly. "Not your legends. If the world asked you to be boring for a year, what would you do?" "Boring?" He pretended offense. "Blasphemy. Basil is blasphemy. Ordinary is salvation." She nudged him. "Answer." He considered. "Fix the North Road. It washes out each spring. Teach the last 2 villages on the ridge how to shore the culverts so they don't lose footbridges every flood. Ban the council from using the word destiny during budget meetings." He paused. "Plant apples near the old watchtower." "More apples." She smiled. "I once swore I would become the kind of woman who could walk through a market and argue with a spice seller about whether the cinnamon was real. Learn all the neighbor dogs' names. Become a regular at a cafe with bad chairs and good gossip. Wear linen in summer that wrinkles, and not apologize for it." He turned, studying her profile, the way dusk made her irises look almost translucent. "We can do those things. We can try," she amended, and the humility of it made something in his chest loosen. He reached for her hand. When she didn't pull away, he traced the faint roadmap of veins and the healing tremor under her skin that had been power, had been duty, had been crown. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Lighter," she said, "not just from loss, from relief, as if some old weight unlaced itself and slid into the river. I keep waiting to be sad about it, because I was taught that power is the only way to keep people safe. But then I hear a child laugh differently and think, perhaps power obscured other kinds of care." He nodded. "Today I watched Rowan not reach for his sword. It looked like a man exhaling for the first time in a decade. A corner of his mouth twitched, and then he sang. I thought the sky would split to celebrate. If the sky has taste," she said dryly, "it will wait." They laughed, and the laughter was balm. They fell into a quiet that had the cadence of lullaby, shared breath, the hush of reeds, the river practicing its vows. Nia set the grass ribbon on the stone and let her palm lie open between them. He didn't take it immediately. He set his palm open too, close enough that warmth braided across the inch of air like a small bridge. When I was very old and very young, she said, I loved a man whose first loyalty was to victory. He loved me as long as I guaranteed it. When the first failure came, he loved me in past tense and his reflection in present. I have avoided love since then by choosing men who wanted to solve me. I don't. His voice was steady, low. I want to live with you, solve drainage, fight about basil, learn where you hide your good tea. Top shelf. She returned his steadiness with her own. I want to argue about which direction the bed should face, and what we call the stray cat that will adopt us, and whether the school should add a course in how to listen when your neighbor is grieving to the standard curriculum. Curriculum? He grinned. You were already writing the syllabus, Professor. Of course. The laughter at her own expense softened the edge of her mouth. Title: Coiling and Uncoiling, or How to Stop Picking Fights with Your Nervous System. He chuckled, and the sound did what only some laughter can. Moved closer instead of deflecting. Teach me tomorrow, he said. Tonight, she corrected. She shifted to face him fully, crossing her legs, placing one hand on her belly and one at her heart. Close your eyes. This is simple. We begin with breath, the kind that tells your body the war has ended. He obeyed. She coached him through 10 slow cycles, lungs broadening, exhale longer than inhale, jaw unclenched, tongue soft. She told him to feel his sit bones as anchors, the river as metronome, the valley as bow. On the next exhale, she murmured, drop your shoulders 3 grains of sand. He did, and 3 became 15, then a cliffside falling, then a shiver. See, she said, not submission, surrender to gravity, different gods. He opened his eyes, startled by how different the world looked from this small shift. The trees are louder. No, you stopped shouting over them. He studied her mouth. You're very good at this. Centuries, she said lightly, and he caught the ache under the joke. He reached, finally, that last inch, and laid his hand in her open palm. They breathed like that for a while. Hand to hand, word to word, something once coiled uncurling on a slab of stone to the sound of a river that had watched every version of them make and unmake vows. He felt neither a rush nor a blaze, but a steadiness, like a door being left ajar on purpose. Lorcan, she said quietly, as if the name were a prayer, and she wanted the valley to hear it. If the wound opens again, and we have no oath left to offer, no lightning, no teeth, will you still stay? Yes, he said. The yes was not dramatic. It was a brick. It held. And if peace turns out to be work, not romance, I'll keep a wrench in my pocket. And if I am ordinary and breakable and occasionally unreasonable about basil? He smiled. I'll be the fool who thinks basil belongs on everything. And I'll be wrong and will argue, and nothing will be threatened except pride. Then we'll choose each other again. Practice, she whispered. Practice, he agreed. And they both felt the words settle, a keel finding water. A breeze lifted her hair and blew it across his cheek. He tucked a strand behind her ear, slow enough to be revoked. She didn't revoke it. The gesture landed like a long-awaited letter. Another lesson? She said, and shifted closer until their knees touched. Name what you feel without making it someone's fault. He thought, tender, scared, wanting. Wanting what? She asked it without weaponizing the answer. This, he said, and leaned in until his forehead met hers. And later, the memory of it when the council shouts. And later than that, the way your mouth will ruin me when we're old and your hair is a map of storms. Her eyes softened. Specificity suits you. She kissed him. Not a lightning strike this time. Not a ritual. Not a detonator. But a human press of lips in the evening dark. It wasn't collapse. It was alignment. His hand found the back of her neck not to claim, but to cradle. When they parted, the river kept flowing because the river respected private miracles. Now you, he said, breath low. Name it. Seen, she said, held. Hungry for a slow life I once called cowardly. Her mouth quirked ruefully. Wrong again. Being wrong is the beginning of wisdom, he said, spoken like a man who intends to be very wise. She bumped his shoulder with hers, then slipped her fingers through his. One more lesson. Coiling and uncoiling for two. She guided his hands to her ribcage, to the low flare where breath begins. Feel the expansion. Hold only until it's information, not control. Release. Imagine your heart is a hand unclenching. Again. They breathed, and the exercise was less about bonds than about permission. He felt the old beast. Not gone, not banished. Learning a new choreography. Guard, then soften. Brace, then listen. Answer, then ask. He pictured bones like reeds, able to bend and return. After a time, his voice found a story the way a stream finds an old channel. My father used to stand where the road meets the river and say every spring can it will flood. We'll patch it. It will flood again, we'll patch again. That's marriage with a valley. He meant duty. I didn't know he also meant love. Love is flooding and patching with someone who doesn't shame you for needing sandbags. She laughed into his shoulder, small and glad. I will embroider that on a pillow, she said. Ugly thread. Too many knots. Perfect. They listened to night assemble itself. Owls wrote parentheses around the path. Somewhere, a door shut and did not slam. A line of lanterns bobbed along the upper terrace, where families returned from the parley with stories that would be edited by butter and sleep. Tomorrow, he said, Edda takes listeners to the river mouth. I'll go, Nia said. I want to hear what the tide thinks of us. I'll come, he replied. She shook her head. Stay. You and Bryn will need to meet with the ridge villagers about the culverts. Ash can bring me notes. We are allowed to divide labor. That's also love. He made a face. I don't like it. You like me. She pecked him once, quick. And I like you liking me enough to sulk when we aren't together for 8 hours. 8? He pretended scandal. Centuries apart, and you give me 8 hours. Practice, she said again, wicked and warm. They walked back slowly, deliberately. Near the amphitheatre, Edda waved a parchment in triumph. I have convinced your scholar to wear boots tomorrow that do not leak, she announced. This is diplomacy. Ash groaned theatrically. My aesthetic is damp. Bryn flicked Lorcan a glance that assessed everything and approved most of it. The scouts reported no torches on Rowan's Ridge, she said, suspiciously quiet. He's thinking, Lorcan said. Let him. Minds at rest sometimes unlearn the worst reflexes. Bryn's gaze slid to Nia. You good? Good, Nia said. Hungry. Stew, Bryn declared, already dragging them toward a long table where someone had left a pot on low coals and a basket of torn bread and a plate of sliced apples that looked like a lesson in gratitude. They ate shoulder to shoulder with the neighbors who were trying out new ways of looking at them. Curiosity, not worship. Respect, not fear. A child approached and asked, very solemnly, Are you the Basil lady? When Nia laughed and said yes, the child handed her a sprig from a pocket. It smelled like heaven and trouble. For your ordinary? The child said and ran off. Later, under the watchtower's shadow, Lorcan and Nia washed bowls in a tin basin. The tower no longer felt like a cell. It felt like a lighthouse finally pointed inland. As they worked in the easy rhythm of two people who could imagine this 20 years from now with better soap and the same jokes, their hands bumped in the rinse water and paused. The pause was not adolescent. It was lit with the knowledge that the world would ask them to be brave in public, so they would be gentle in private. Come, he said, there's something. He led her up the narrow steps past Bryn's camp bed and Ash's avalanche of notes to the roof where the whole valley lay like a sleeping animal. The stars were out with the blunt honesty of clear weather. He pointed. There, he said. The old wayfinders called it the Coil and Fang. We forgot its name when we made our own too loud. She found the constellation, two arcs meeting, not competing. We could rename it, she said. We could remember it, he countered. Both, she decided. Remember and rename, memory with edits, the only kind that doesn't lie. Below, the amphitheater's last embers died into ash. The mountains breathed their old steady breath. Nia leaned into him. He held her with the caution and confidence of a craftsman who had studied the grain of the wood and knew where to apply pressure and where to rest his hand. They did not need to say promise. It was implied by the way their bodies forgot to tense. Middle of story question, he said, smiling into her hair. For the crowd. She laughed. All right. Your turn to design the comment trap. He cleared his throat in a ridiculous baritone. What counts as ordinary love to you? The habit that quietly saves your day without applause. Is it tea on the same step every morning, a text at lunch, fixing the squeaky hinge? Tell us in the comments so we can steal your ideas. Steal, she echoed, amused, and kissed his cheek. Ethical theft, community sourcing, he objected, then spun her slowly. A foolish little dance that would embarrass a king, but delight anyone who had ever survived a war and still wanted to learn a waltz. Tomorrow, she said again when they stopped. Tomorrow, he agreed. They slept, actually slept, on cots that complained and blankets that remembered both their shapes. He woke once to rain on the roof and the sound of Nia breathing, steady and low. For the first time in years, he did not reach for a knife in the dark. He reached for her hand, found it, and drifted. Dawn arrived like a promise that kept itself. Edda and the listeners set out with staffs and ropes and flasks of salted tea. Ash wore the dry boots like betrayal. Bryn collected ridge elders and snapped them into a line polite enough to persuade and stubborn enough to build. Nia stood at the edge of the road and pressed her forehead to Lorcan's, unabashed. Tonight, she said. Tonight, he echoed. and he meant stew and reports and maps and another slow kiss and a lesson about coiling he would practice in the stable when no one watched. "Basil," she threatened. "Salt," he countered. They parted as people who know how to meet again. As she joined Edda on the lower path, she glanced back. He was already surrounded by elders arguing about culvert diameters, like poets quarreling over rhyme schemes. He was smiling. It looked good on him. She stored the picture for later and for always. The day was work. Work felt like worship. By sunset, the river mouth had spoken. The tide did not recoil. It listened back. Edda wrote one word on her inner map. Held. Ash added a footnote. Corrigible. It's a near-tucked basil behind her ear, and promised a child she would teach the council how to breathe before they decreed. And when dark returned, so did they. Each to the other, each to the valley, each to a life neither had been brave enough to want before. They met at the watchtower steps and did not need a ritual to justify the way that their hands found each other. Practice, practice, practice. They climbed to the roof again. Stars stacked the sky like a choir holding a note. "Tonight's lesson?" he asked. "Rest," she said. "The rarest one." They obeyed. The valley held. Somewhere far to the north, the wound quieted a fraction more, as if an ancient body finally admitted it wanted to heal. The river had listened. The tide had stood calm. The valley had exhaled. So peace should have felt certain. It didn't. 3 days after the parley, a messenger from the coast arrived on a wind that smelled wrong. Bryn met him first. His eyes were black with exhaustion. His palms bled from gripping a shell seal too long. "The wound," he rasped, "is humming again. Not open, but hungry." The sea turned metallic at dawn. The fish swam backward. The word humming hollowed every chest it entered. Lorcan found Nia at the watchtower, coaxing Basil into a window box with the patience of a goddess pretending to be a gardener. He told her. She didn't drop the trowel, but her hands shook. "It's too soon," she whispered. "Balance shouldn't shift for another cycle." "Unless someone forced it," he said. By evening, the scouts returned with salt on their boots, though they hadn't reached the coast. Ash spread a sample on the table. Grey dust glittering like ground glass. "It's not sea salt," they said. "It's residue from power. Something unbound without ritual." Rowan's message arrived next. "Come to the amphitheater. Urgent." Lorcan's jaw tightened. He promised no more hidden councils. "Maybe this one hides nothing," Nia said, but doubt ghosted her voice. They went. The amphitheater blazed with torches, elders murmuring in nervous cadences. In the center lay a body. Edda Tide's second in command, throat ringed with pale markings shaped like coils. Rowan's face was ashen. "The wound spat her out at dawn," he said. "The tidekeepers say a serpent sigil rose from the waves." All eyes turned to Nia. She went still, shoulders squaring the way cliffs do before they crumble. "That mark isn't mine," she said. "Every carving matches your line." Rowan shot back. "Tell us why." Lorcan stepped between them, voice iron. "She saved this valley. Do not—" "She may have saved it to rule it," Rowan thundered. "You think I didn't notice the storm in her veins returning? You think love erases lineage?" The torches hissed as if in agreement. Nia's pupils narrowed to slits. For one terrifying heartbeat, she did look like the myth they feared. "If I wanted to rule," she said, each word measured, "you would already be kneeling." The amphitheater trembled, not from her voice, but from the mountain itself. A deep rumble answered the accusation. Stone dust fell like dry snow. Ash whispered, "The wound hears us." That night, no one slept. The old instincts slithered back. Watch shifts, perimeter patrols, whispered prayers to vanished gods. Nia stood on the balcony, staring toward the invisible coast. Her breath smoked though the night was warm. Lorcan joined her, barefoot, cloak loose. "Tell me we're not back where we started," he said. She didn't answer. "Nia." She turned, and he saw it, the faint glow under her skin returning, gold, chasing the veins of her hands. "Something inside me woke when they accused me," she said. "Maybe belief resurrected what choice buried." "Then we'll bury it again." "You can't kill faith with reason, Lorcan." She closed her eyes. "They've worshipped the war longer than we've lived. They will make me their villain to feel righteous again." He gripped the rail. "Then we fight the story, not each other." Her gaze met his, full of lightning and apology. "If the wound opens because I'm alive, you will have to fight me." He flinched. "Don't." "I'm telling you before someone else does. It's the oldest curse. When harmony tips, the serpent becomes hunger. Then we rewrite it again. Some stories refuse revision." He caught her hand anyway, desperate. "We made the valley believe in peace. Make me believe now." She leaned her forehead to his. "I do, but belief doesn't always win the vote." Dawn broke in screams. Smoke rose from the lower ridge, stores burning, animals scattering. Bryn burst into the tower, sword drawn. "Saboteurs," she panted, "wearing serpent sigils." Lorcan grabbed his gear. "None of ours did this. Try telling that to Panic." Outside, chaos was choreography without a conductor, villagers clutching torches, elders shouting orders no one heard. Someone hurled a stone that clipped Nia's shoulder. She didn't cry out. She simply looked at the man who'd thrown it. He dropped the next rock as if his bones remembered mercy. Lorcan barked, "Bryn, get the families to the caves. Ash, records, medicine, everything dry." "And you?" Bryn asked. "I stop this before it becomes legend." He strode into the square where a crowd had cornered two teenagers branded with fake serpent marks. Thieves, not prophets. Rowan stood over them, sword half drawn. "Enough!" Lorcan roared. The authority in it froze motion like frost. "They're children. They're messengers," Rowan spat. "Confess who sent you." "They stole grain," Lorcan said. "Not gods." The crowd wavered. Then someone screamed from the cliffs, one of the scouts. "The sea's rising." All heads turned. Beyond the valley mouth, a wall of mist climbed the horizon, humming like 1,000 bees. Nia's voice cut through the panic. "It's not the sea, it's the wound." Hours later, the council convened again, fear sweating through every word. "The wound responds to her," Rowan said. "It rose when she returned, slept when she left, rises again now that she stays." Lorcan's patience frayed. "Correlation isn't causation." "Spoken like a man who loves the suspect." Rowan snapped. The phrase detonated. Even allies turned uncertain eyes on them. Nia stood, spine straight. If exile seals it, I'll go. No, Lorcan's said. Yes. She faced him, voice soft but final. Peace costs. Maybe this time it costs presence. He shook his head. You taught me surrender isn't sacrifice. Don't twist it now. She reached for his face. You are the gate, Lorcan. If the key stays too near, the lock reawakens. We can't risk the world to prove we were right about love. He caught her wrist. You're asking me to become the legend again, the man who hunted you. I'm asking you to save what we built. The room seemed to contract until it held only two silhouettes made a refusal. Rowan lowered his voice. Take her to the coast. Let the tide decide. Lorcan drew breath to argue. Then the mountain tremored hard enough to topple torches. The chamber plunged into flickering red. From the fissure in the floor, a hum rose, deeper than fear. Ash shouted, It's opening under us! Stone cracked. People scattered. In the chaos, Nia looked at Lorcan one last time and whispered, Hold them steady. Then she ran toward the fissure and leapt. He screamed her name, but the sound drowned under the quake. She fell into light. Not heat, remembrance. The wound was not a pit. It was a throat swallowing history. Shapes swirled. Versions of herself, serpents of flame, beasts made of grief. She landed on something that might have been air and might have been memory. The wound spoke in the language of every choice she had postponed. You broke the vow, child of coil. Balance demands its keeper. I won't rebuild the cage, she said. Then I'll take the valley. Above, the fissure widened. Lorcan appeared at its rim, rope around his waist, Bryn anchoring the line. Don't you dare finish this alone! He shouted. She smiled up through the wind. You always arrive exactly when it's impossible. He sit down anyway. The wound tried to throw him back with visions. His father's death. His own doubt. Every failure sharpened into blade. He kept moving. When he reached her, the air shimmered between them like a barrier. She pressed her palm against it. If I merge with it, it sleeps. But I disappear. Then I merge with you. No. Yes. He pressed his hand to hers through the light. Two choices make balance, not one. The wound screamed. Lightning speared the chasm walls. Trust me, he said. I always did. Together they stepped into the light. From the valley, the watchers saw the fissure erupt into a column of golden smoke. Sound died. Time stuttered. Ash scribbled what they could before the quill melted. Bryn held the rope until it snapped and burned her palms. Rowan dropped to his knees, muttering the old words backward. Then, silence. The column collapsed inward like a lung exhaling. When the dust cleared, the fissure was gone. The mountain's skin smoothed as if nothing had ever been torn. No bodies, no blood. Only a faint trail of basil leaves spiraling upward before catching fire and turning into starlight. Bryn whispered, Tell me they didn't just... Ash swallowed. They did. Rowan bowed his head. Balance restored. But the word restored felt wrong. The air carried a new timbre, softer, human, unfinished. Night fell uneasy. The valley waited for instructions that didn't come. Bryn organized search parties anyway. Ash mapped readings, the hum gone, the tides normal. Yet when they passed the watchtower, Its windows flickered with unfamiliar light. Inside, two shadows shimmered on the wall. A wolf and a serpent intertwined, fading as the torches approached. Ash murmured, "They're not gone. They're rewritten." Bryn touched the stone where their hands had pressed last. Warm, she smiled through tears. "Practice," she whispered. "Even now. When love and duty pull in opposite directions, which would you choose, and why? Share your take in the comments. Your answer might be someone else's courage. Silence, thick as velvet, held them after the fall. No wind, no hum, no up or down. Just light so soft it didn't cast shadows. As if the world had finally stopped choosing a side. Lorcan felt Nia's fingers first. Warm, human, threaded through his. He didn't open his eyes yet. He memorized the weight. "Alive?" he asked, voice hushed by a room that felt like a cathedral forgetting its god. "Between," Nia answered. "This is the hinge." He opened his eyes. They stood on a plane made of memory, a floor like pressed silk, a horizon that folded back on itself. Floating in the near distance, three doors drifted, as if tethered to their breath. One of obsidian, one of glass, one of wood. Above each, a symbol glowed: fang, coil, circle. Lorcan's mouth went dry. "Tests," he said. "Choices," Naya corrected, though her voice trembled. "The wound speaks in architecture." They stepped forward together. The closer they came, the clearer the doors became. Not just objects, but invitations. The obsidian door, fang sigil, was beautiful the way knives are beautiful. Its surface gleamed with bloodline, scenes of Hale ancestors winning impossible battles, villages saved by fear, boys taught to become shields before they knew they had spines. When Lorcan lifted a hand toward it, the metal warmed, welcoming him home like an old uniform that still fit in all the wrong places. He withdrew his hand. The glass door, coil sigil, shivered with images of queens, wings of light, armies kneeling, oceans bowing to a throat that carried the key. Nia's pulse jumped. Across the surface, she saw herself infinite, terrible, luminous, adored, and alone. She dropped her gaze. The wooden door, circle sigil, looked unremarkable. Grain running honest, knots where storms had once lived, a latch burnished by many hands. In its panels sat scenes so ordinary the heart could miss them at first. A culvert fixed before the flood. A neighbour's grief held without advice. A pot of basil going to seed and reseeded again. A man and a woman arguing about the bed facing east and laughing later because the sun comes up whether the bed knows or not. Lorcan exhaled. "No crowns. Just practice," Nia said softly. They circled the doors like wolves around a campfire, knowing that indecision was a decision too. "Say it out loud," he murmured. "All of it." She nodded. "If I choose glass, I reclaim power. The wound sleeps when I command it. The valley obeys. We trade fear for order. The story resets, with a gentler tyrant maybe, but a tyrant still. And if I choose obsidian," he said, "I become the beast, the way my fathers wanted. Guardian with teeth, no questions asked. People are safe because they're controlled. I die a hero with a sword instead of a man with a wrench." They stood before the wood. The circle sigil glowed warmer, as if the door were near a hearth. Through a hairline crack, they smelled coffee, rain, stew, wool, apples. Nothing grand, everything needed. He met her eyes. If we choose wood, we return mortal. No vow to hold the wound shut. No lightning. We keep the valley whole with hands and breath. We will fail sometimes. We will fix it the next day. We will be blamed when life hurts, she said, because it will. People will prefer gods to neighbors. They forgive gods faster. Who do you want to be blamed as? He asked gently. A myth, or my neighbor? Her laugh broke and fixed itself in one sound. Your neighbor, she said. Then your wife, if we are lucky and stubborn. Heat moved through his chest like a sunrise finding a window. Lucky and stubborn is our brand. They didn't open the door yet, because the room would punish haste, because they had one more ghost to bury. Look, she whispered, chin lifting toward the space between the doors. Between fang and coil hung a mirror. It had not been there a moment ago, no frame, only surface, quicksilver, catching not their bodies but their oldest reflexes. In the mirror, Lorcan saw himself at 17, swinging at shadows because grief had nowhere to go. In the mirror, Nia saw herself at centuries, erecting rules because the ache in her chest was louder than the ocean. In the mirror, the beast and serpent kissed like enemies and fought like lovers and built a civilization on the wrong kind of vow. Nia reached toward the mirror, then stopped. If I forgive her, she said of that gleaming stranger who ruled, I lose an excuse. You gain a life, he said. And if I forgive him? She nodded toward the beast made of grief. I stop chasing your line for apology and start asking for partnership. He took her hand again. All my apologies are yours anyway, and so is my partnership. Choose the thing that lets us plant basil terribly and still call it dinner. Terribly? She arched a brow. Tragically, he said. Legendary catastrophes of pesto. She smiled, helpless and holy. Then help me say goodbye. They stood before the mirror and spoke to the versions of themselves who had kept the world spinning by making themselves lonely. Thank you, Nia told the queen, for holding the key when no one else could, for being the chest that kept the last word safe. I retire you with gratitude. Thank you, Lorcan told the beast, for throwing yourself between children and monsters, for being teeth until I grew a spine that can hold a wrench. He swallowed. Stand down. The mirror didn't shatter. It softened, like a pond stepping out of winter. The light in the room grew warmer. The glass door dimmed. The obsidian cooled. The wooden door brightened as if someone on the other side had just put a kettle on. A voice filled the hinge room. Not the wound now, but something older and kinder. The voice of the world when it admits it prefers gardens to altars. Name your vow, it said. Lorcan looked at Nia, and Nia looked at Lorcan, and they answered together, not in poetry, but in promises they knew how to keep. I vowed to guard the weak before I guard my pride, he said, to listen before I decree, to fix a road before I win an argument. I vow to teach what I know and stop when I don't, she said, to coil only what needs holding, to release what needs air, to choose repair over rule. They breathed in, they breathed out. He added, because truth requires specificity, I vow to love you when life is thrilling and when it's paperwork. She added, because joy requires audacity, I vow to embarrass you at markets by overbuying basil. The hinge room approved. The circle sigils steadied to a deep, heartbeat glow. They reached for the latch. "Wait," Lorcan said, the word catching on something he had not yet admitted. What if the valley wants God's back? What if they punish us for refusing? They might, she said. And we will keep showing up, because love is not a performance. It is a practice. The valley will relearn that, because we will model it every market day until it becomes boring. Boring, he said reverently, and pressed his forehead to hers. Imagine. He kissed her, not as magic, not as proof, but as punctuation. They lifted the latch together. The door opened onto darkness that smelled like rain and bread. They stepped. Up above, the valley sat in the stunned quiet after a crisis without a body. Bryn doled bandages like sacraments. Ash scribbled a new heading across a torn page. If they don't return, what must we build anyway? Rowan paced the amphitheatre, muttering prayers and profanities like a man interrogating his god and not accepting the first answer. The wind changed. Not a wind, exactly, more like a temperature adjustment in the story. Torches fluttered and steadied. A child at the rim stopped crying because her mother's chest stopped shaking. Edda Tide arrived breathless from the river mouth, hair snarled with salt. "The wound is sleeping," she panted. "Not guarded, held. Whatever you did with your fear, do it again." "They did it," Bryn snapped, then softened. "Maybe we can too." Rowan stopped while pacing. "What now?" Edda planted her staff, the sound practical and priestly at once. "Now you decide whether to write your next chapter as a eulogy or a manual." Ash looked up, eyes flaring. "Manual," they said, as if discovering a secret they'd been carrying for years. "Absolutely manual." They started listing in a steady, sacred monotone. Neighbor check schedules, flood maps redrawn, listening posts at the river, apprenticeships, masons, midwives, mediators, food stores in 5 hubs, breathing lessons before council votes, conflict circles, a line item in the budget for repairing things no one wants to admit they broke. People listened, not because the ideas were new, but because they were obvious and someone finally gave them a name. "Write it," Edda said. "Not on stone, in habits." Bryn let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "If those two come back," she whispered, "they're getting assigned to the boring committee." "The one that saves everyone's life," Ash said, smiling. "The only committee that should exist." They were still smiling when the watchtower door opened, like a yawn after a long cry. Lorcan and Nia stepped out together. Not glowing, not crowned. Wet hair, scraped knuckles, dust on their boots. Ice red the way ice get when people have said goodbye and meant it. For a heartbeat, the crowd did nothing. Their brains struggling to match expectation to reality. Then 3 things happened at once. The child with the basil sprig squealed and ran. Bryn's sword fell from her hand and clanged. Rowan took one involuntary step forward, like a man being pulled by a tide he'd vowed not to trust. Nia gathered the child without ceremony, without speech, without spectacle. She tucked the basil behind her own ear. "We chose the door with a latch," she told the child, as if that explained the world. Lorcan clasped Bryn's forearms like the bridge they both needed. "Report," he said, because he was still himself. Bryn wiped her eyes with her wrist, mortified and unrepentant. Minor fires, 2 broken wrists. A storehouse burned, but the grain was already moved, because Ash is a prophet and Edda is annoying. She threw a glance at the elders. The rest is politics. Rowan approached like a man surrendering a uniform. He looked from Lorcan to Naya, unsure which apology to start with. The wound is not our god, Naya finished gently. It's part of our weather. We'll learn to read it without worshipping storms. Rowan's mouth opened, closed. He nodded once. It looked nothing like defeat, and everything like relief. Edda whistled low. Well, are you gods today? No, Lorcan said. We're the boring committee. Ash whooped. Someone laughed. Someone else sobbed. It sounded like a hymn trying on a new melody. Nia set the child down and faced the crowd. She didn't raise her hands. She raised her voice just enough to get to the back row. We had 3 doors, she said. Power with fear, power with worship, or practice with each other. She shrugged, a queen dismissing a crown. We picked the latch. Latch, murmured the thin woman with the ribbon, as if testing a password. She smiled. I like latches. They ask to be opened from both sides. Exactly, Naya said. So here is our latch, a simple vow anyone can keep. She looked at Lorcan. Say it with me. He took her hand, not for theatre, but for balance. Together they spoke. When fear rises, we will pause. When anger shouts, we will breathe. When the story demands a hero, we will bring a broom. When the road floods, we will build the culvert. Again. When we are wrong, we will be corrigible. When we are tired, we will rest. When we are tempted to rule, we will repair. Silence settled on the words the way dew finds morning. Then movement at the edge of the amphitheatre. Old men shifting their weight, young mothers nodding, teenagers glancing at one another, not for permission, but for courage. The vow travelled, not mouth to mouth, but task to task, the purest kind. Rowan cleared his throat. Terms, he said out of habit, then startled himself by smiling. I think you just wrote them. Edda grinned, feral and fond. Someone put the kettle on. Bryn elbowed Ash. Manual? Already drafting, they said, producing a pencil like a magician pulls a dove. Working title, The Latch Book. Lorcan turned to Naya, an expression half wonder, half exhausted joy. We did it, he said, and then corrected himself like a man learning a better tense. We're doing it. Her smile broke open and didn't apologize. Practice, she whispered, even here. He bent his head to kiss her, still slow, still human, when the mountain itself gave a little sigh, as if relieved to be included. Far to the north, at the invisible lip of the ancient wound, the tide curled and uncurled, testing the new balance. It found hands instead of teeth. It found bread instead of sacrifice. It found people standing watch with thermoses and songs badly sung and maps that changed when the river did. The wound slept, not because it was caged, but because it was finally being read like weather. Morning came like a verdict that chose mercy. Mist braided the terraces. The river spoke in soft S's. The watchtower windows glowed with the yellow of toast and plans. The valley felt new without being strange, as if someone had cleaned a lens rather than replaced a landscape. Ash was already awake, sleeves rolled, pencil behind one ear, a stack of pages anchored, by a steaming mug. The top sheet read, "The Latch Book, a manual for ordinary guardians." Bryn prowled in satisfied circles, drilling volunteers on evacuation routes and culvert math and the sacred art of checking on your crankiest neighbor first. Lorcan and Naya stood on the roof a moment longer than necessary, letting themselves be selfish with Dawn. Rooftops matter when you no longer need altars. "Say it," Nia murmured, eyes on the river's silvering skin. He obliged, a man giving thanks aloud so it couldn't slip away. "We came back." "We chose the latch," she echoed. "And the latch chose us back." He grinned, very poetic for a piece of hardware. "Hardware is poetry when it keeps rain out," she said, and the old queen in her bowed to the contractor she had become. They descended into the watchtower, where the manual in progress had already grown a spine. Ash waved a page like a banner. Chapter 1. Breathing before voting. They tapped a line with pride. "We open meetings with 5 quiet breaths. No speeches until the fidgeting stops." Bryn snorted. "Rowan's going to combust." "Combust less," Ash corrected. Rowan arrived 2 minutes after his reputation. He paused in the doorway, as if checking his shape against a room that had outgrown his old silhouette. His sword was sheathed. His hands were empty. "I brought bread," he announced, because apologies land better when accompanied by carbohydrates. From the ribboned woman's oven. He set the loaf down. He looked at Naya, at Lorcan. "You came back through the wooden door." "Through the door with the latch," Nia said, voice gentle. "Good," he grunted. Then lower, as if the stone needed to hear. "I'm tired of guarding the same grievance." Nia's smile was small and devastating. "Then let's guard each other instead." Bryn clapped once. "Schedule. We have tides to read, roads to fix, and a council meeting to civilize. Also the basil problem." "Problem?" Nia raised a brow. "Basil is creep," Bryn said. "Spreads like rumor. Contained gardens only." Nia gasped theatrically. "Censorship." "Zoning," Bryn countered. "The boring committee has ordinances." They moved like a team that had rehearsed for years without knowing it. Edda arrived with tide charts and a sack of river stones smooth as answers. "The wound slept the whole night," she reported. "It likes lullabies sung off-key." "Good," Ash said, scribbling, "off-key lullabies permitted." Edda peered at the developing manual, and with solemn mischief, added a line in a tidy hand. "When in doubt, make tea." "Make tea is not policy," Bryn protested. "It is, actually," Edda said. "People who've been handed tea are 63% less violent." "Is that a real number?" Rowan asked. "It is now," Edda said, "because we've decided to track it." They planned the day. Lorcan to the North Road, with a crew of teenagers who needed jobs that offered blisters and purpose. Need to the South Terraces to teach coiling and uncoiling. How not to pick fights with your nervous system to a crowd skeptical about the title and in love with the results. Bryn to the granary rebuild. Ash and Edda to draft sections 2 through 5 of the Latch Book. Conflict circles, flood preparedness, neighbor maps, the ritual of pausing. Before they scattered, Lorcan held up a hand. His voice was not command. It was cohesion. "1 minute," he said. "Same vow as last night. Together." They stood in the ring of the old tower, the spiral in the floor now just an honest pattern, not a cage. The four of them spoke the lines with the practical reverence of people who intend to mean what they say at noon as much as they meant it at dawn. When fear rises, we will pause. When anger shouts, we will breathe. When the story demands a hero, we will bring a broom. When the road floods, we will build the culvert again. When we are wrong, we will be corrigible. When we are tired, we will rest. When we are tempted to rule, we will repair. Rowan listened like a student who had finally found a class worth attending. He didn't repeat the words. He held them with his posture. Sometimes that counts more. They dispersed into the brightening morning. Montage, taught to the valley by time. On the North Road, Lorcan showed 3 teenagers how to dig a trench with the angle of their shoulders instead of the fury of their wrists. "Let gravity do half the work," he said. "Save your rage for poems." When one boy muttered that poems were for girls, Lorcan handed him the shovel and said, "Then write a poem that repairs a road." "I'll read it at the council." The boy rolled his eyes and dug better. On the south terraces, Nia guided 30 villagers through breath that prioritized exhale. The skeptical baker wept and called it allergies. The stoic blacksmith stayed after to ask how to unclench his jaw, learned during a bad marriage. The young mother with a colicky baby learned to rock her own body first. And the child's cry changed key. "Not magic," Nia said, always refusing the crown with a boo. "Practice." She taught the self-hug and the shoulder tap and how to say, "I'm spiraling," without shame. In the granary, Bryn barked orders and praise in equal measure. She caught an old man trying to lift a beam too heavy for his back and reassigned him to the critical job of storytelling on a bench with the children, so their patience wouldn't crack before boards did. "Infrastructure," she told him, deadpan. He looked affronted and pleased. In the council hall, Ash and Edda argued like siblings who share the same spine. They named crosswalks, drew new floodlines, wrote the sentence that would change more fights than any decree. We will pause for 3 breaths before speaking in anger. Ash drafted a listening permit for elders known to interrupt, a joke that became policy when the room cheered. At the river mouth, Edda's listeners stood knee-deep with poles and flags, measuring the tide's attention. When a wave curled wrong, they hummed the lullaby off-key. The wave corrected its manners. News travelled. The valley retrained its reflexes. It did not become kind overnight. It became possible. By noon, the watchtower courtyard filled with things that look small in songs and large in life. Bowls of stew, torn bread, a pile of tools, a nap on a bench. Naya returned dusty and radiant, with the precise fatigue that follows honest teaching. Lorcan arrived with his shoulders loose, the shovel shining like a polished promise. They stood under the hawthorn tree, whose thorns had gentled over the years, into something that snagged sweaters but not skin. The river threw coins of light between leaves, a child danced by with a tin cup, and the self-appointed title of hydration captain. The world, blessedly, was a comedy again. "You smell like Bale," Lorcan said. "You smell like damp dirt," Nia replied. "Divine." He reached into his pocket and produced a small, ridiculous gift. A brass latch, polished to warm glow. "For the door we haven't built yet," he said. "House with terrible chairs and good gossip." She took it with the formal attention a queen would give a treaty. "And uneven paint," she said, Because we will hang art before we fix the trim. Sacrilege, he said. Practice, she countered. They might have kissed there in daylight and not apologize, but a murmur rolled up the path, the sound of a crowd trying to behave like a community, and failing at the seams. Rowan approached, flanked by elders and teenagers, and the ribboned woman and the baker and the blacksmith and the child with the bezel sprig tucked behind one ear like a green comet. The amphitheatre had asked for a meeting. The valley came as it was. Rowan looked different, not smaller, not softer, but less armed. He cleared his throat and faced the people he had led with an iron that now knew when to become a plough. I accused in fear, he said. No ceremony. I built my power on an oath I didn't understand. That ends today. He turned to Lorcan and Nia. If you will have us as partners, we will learn the latch together. He extended an empty hand. Lorcan took it and did not grip hard. Some reconciliations are a handshake. Some are a roof. Nia stepped to the circle's center where the old sigil, wolf and serpent now spiraled into a ring, had faded to the color of time. She didn't call lightning. She called the crowd to attention with a story that began in the cave and ended in a kitchen. There's a line we need to echo, she said, glancing at Lorcan. From the moment that started this new chapter. He remembered, in Act Two's glow, when the pool had mirrored their ancestors, he had said it with shock, ended the war. She had corrected him, we've started evolution. He spoke now, voice steady, the echo matured. We didn't end the war, we started the work. And work, Nia said, is love wearing shoes. The thin woman with the ribbon laughed through tears. Then my grandmother was in love her whole life. Exactly, Nia said. She just forgot to call it that. Edda knocked her staff once, official and tender. Manual time, she announced. We'll read the first 3 rules so the children can memorize them and scold us later. Ash stepped up, pages fluttering. Rule 1, before you argue, drink water. Rule 2, before you decree, take 5 breaths. Rule 3, before you call for a hero, check the broom closet. Laughter rippled. Relief found a rhythm. Bryn added, Rule 4, Basil stays in its lane. Guideline, Nia amended. Negotiable. Ordinance, Bryn returned, and the crowd cheered, because the fate of a herb matters when the fate of a world feels finally manageable. They set to the formal business of the day with informal grace. Votes were taken with breaths between. Disagreements rose, sharpened, softened, resolved. The child hydration captain refilled cups with tyrannical efficiency. The baker distributed apology scones, currant and lemon, the traditional pastry of I was wrong and would like to remain friends. By late afternoon, a decision the valley would repeat for generations was made without blood or rumor. Every public meeting would end with 2 things, a task list and a gratitude round. Because, Ash noted in the Latch book, governance is a kind of love letter, and good letters require specifics. They adjourned not with the clang of gongs, but with the rustle of chores being accepted. At dusk, Lorcan and Nia walked to the bend of the river where they had first named their ordinary. Fireflies rose like punctuation marks. The air held the memory of ovens and rope and fresh-cut boards. They sat on the old slab of stone, their cloaks spread like a map of warmth. Echo one more thing, she said, eyes kind, from the first night. Coffee, he guessed, strong and sweet, fitting. She teased, and he leaned in, forehead to hers, the gesture that had become their hinge. "Here is my echo," he said. "You once asked if I would stay when there were no teeth and no lightning, only paperwork. I'm here for the paperwork." "And Basil's sabotage," she added. "I'm here for that too," he admitted gravely. They kissed the way people do who have earned daylight, slow, honest, seen. The river moved past like an approving elder. Somewhere behind them, the amphitheatre sparked a new tradition. A weekly market where the listening permit hung on a nail, where the kettle never didn't boil, where teenagers sold poems next to culvert nails, and both were considered tools. The stars climbed and found their old constellations renamed with better stories. The one once called Fang and Coil, the shape they had argued over from the watchtower roof, gleamed above them. The valley now called it the Latch. Nia rested her head on Lorcan's shoulder. "Tomorrow?" "Manual sections 6 through 9, he said. "Quiet patrols. A seat-building workshop. Basil zoning hearings." "Basil," she threatened. "Salt," he countered. "Practice," they said together, pleased by the chorus they had made from an ordinary word. Far to the north, the wound slept, not because it was feared, but because it was fed what all old wounds require. Attention, warmth, time, and the refusal to keep picking. The beast in him stretched and settled like a dog at a hearth. The serpent in her unwound and rewound like a scarf between seasons. Not gone, integrated. Guardian and rememberer, finally on the same side of the table. They watched the last light climb the mountain and fold itself away. No one needed to swear anything new. Their lives would be the oath. We're closing the book with a simple challenge. What's one ordinary habit you'll adopt this week that quietly protects your world, your latch? Share it in the comments. Your idea might be the blueprint someone else needs tomorrow.